She was a bright college student who dreamed of a career in law.
She was going into criminal justice and ultimately wanted to become a lawyer.
He was an old flame that always got her heart racing.
They're friends with benefits.
Together, they reconnected in a way neither expected.
She was pregnant with this child. There was nothing that was planned.
She was getting together with the father of her child. She was very happy.
But a few short weeks shy of her due date,
Get out of the car!
a shocking abduction sent their fiery romance up in flames.
Get in there!
She feels lighter fluid being doused all over her, and then hears the striking of a match.
Next thing she knew, she was on fire. And she hears 2 gunshots. She feels a pain. She knows she's been shot.
In order to capture the assailant, police must enter a sweltering hothouse of lies, deceit, and unspeakable betrayal.
Ma, I've been kidnapped.
Who would ever contemplate harming a pregnant woman? Why would somebody do this in such cold blood?
May 26, 2012, Detroit, Michigan. In the early morning darkness, a frightened 22-year-old woman is fighting for her life. 9 months pregnant, LaTanya Bowman is engulfed in flames. Her first instinct is to try and extinguish the blaze, but as the fire consumes her, LaTanya remains motionless.
She was abducted, bound with duct tape, set on fire, and she heard 2 gunshots. Knowing that she was injured, possibly shot, she made the decision to play dead in an attempt to save her life and the life of her unborn child.
LaTanya's plan works. Believing she is dead, the monster responsible for this crime flees on foot. When the coast is clear, LaTanya puts out the fire and slowly crawls toward her car.
She's gone into survival mode. This guy leaves the keys in the vehicle. She realizes that and she jumps into the vehicle.
Despite her life-threatening injuries, LaTanya somehow finds her way to the home she shares with her mother.
Oh my God, what happened to you? Let's go to the hospital, move over.
As LaTanya is rushed into the emergency room, doctors are shocked by the severity of her wounds.
And she's got 2nd and 3rd degree burns, and she's shot. She is very seriously injured.
They weren't sure if she was going to survive, if the child was going to survive.
Hospital personnel contacts police and inform them there's been a crime. One so gruesome it turns the stomachs of even the most calloused investigators.
When it rises to the level where it makes a detective sort of raise his eyebrows, it's unusual. And this one was brutal.
Overnight, LaTanya's harrowing ordeal makes headlines across the country. Local police are feeling the heat. They need to solve this crime and solve it fast. But as investigators race to piece together the puzzle, an unimaginable picture begins to emerge. One of pure evil and a sucker punch expectant mother LaTanya Bowman never saw coming.
We think we've seen it all, but we're always amazed by what humans are capable of doing to another human.
Growing up in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, LaTanya Bowman knew early on what she wanted to do with her life.
She was studying criminal justice in school.
Well, she had that sort of vibrance about her, you know? She was young and hopeful, and, you know, she wasn't somebody out there that was working the streets.
A dedicated and popular student, by the time LaTanya turned 21, she was well on her way to fulfilling her dreams. She was a senior at a local community college and was on track to graduate ahead of schedule.
She had the whole world ahead of her. She was a hardworking college student and very dedicated to excelling.
And among her legion of friends, there was no one LaTanya enjoyed sharing her hopes and ambitions with more than close friend Jamal Rogers. LaTanya and Jamal had been tight since they first met in high school, nearly 6 years earlier.
Not bad, not bad, not bad.
She thinks that this guy is a great guy, and in fact, she told her mother that he's just the nicest guy she's ever met.
Tall, dark, and handsome, LaTanya had long harbored a soft spot in her heart for Jamal. In fact, their connection had never been strictly platonic.
Oh!
They did pretty much have an on-again, off-again relationship. Both of them described it that way, or more like friends with benefits.
While their physical attraction for one another was undeniable, the two friends felt it best to keep their relationship an open one.
It was really a different kind of relationship. LaTanya had seen other people and has had Jamal, and they were both aware of that, but they would still get together and be intimate and enjoy each other's company.
But in the fall of 2011, LaTanya and Jamal's relationship took an unexpected turn.
Got some good news for you.
Oh, yeah? What's up?
I'm pregnant.
LaTanya wanted him to make the decision to be a part of this child's life, and I really think to be in her life as well. He's a good guy, he's a good friend, and I think she perhaps saw a future with him.
While LaTanya embraced the idea of parenthood, to her surprise, Jamal didn't share her enthusiasm.
Initially, Jamal was very reluctant to have the baby and initially wanted LaTanya to have an abortion.
You plan on keeping it?
Yes, Jamal, I plan on keeping it. Where did that come from?
I think when she got pregnant, Jamal kind of broke off contact for a while.
What? Jamal.
But by the time LaTanya reached her third trimester, Jamal had rekindled their relationship and was as excited about the baby as she was.
So, what about Glendon?
Glendon?
Gillespie.
No.
Come on, that's original. Come on, nobody's got that name.
They were discussing names for the baby. This was, getting very close, and they started to go out and see more of one another.
With their relationship back on track, the couple made plans for a date at a local drive-in theater.
Why don't we go to the movies or something? Let's go hit the drive-in or something.
The drive-in?
Yeah, we're not gonna have any time once the baby comes, so we might as well go live a little bit.
You got a point.
Exactly, don't I, baby?
In her eyes, she was getting together with the father of her child to talk through some issues that, of course, two expectant parents are gonna have to deal with.
On Friday, May 25th, 2012, LaTanya drove her SUV to the home Jamal shared with his mother. After picking him up, the two headed to the nearby city of Dearborn for a midnight showing at the drive-in. As they watched the film, the two reconnected in ways neither expected.
Baby, look. Now, you know I'm always here for you, all right?
Prove it. So I don't
Prove
believe
it.
you. I don't believe
What
it
I gotta
right
do
now.
to prove it, huh?
I don't know.
Come
You tell me.
Come here, girl.
They had sex there in the car at the drive-in.
For LaTanya and Jamal, this passionate encounter seemed to cement the rock-solid nature of their relationship. But little did they know that in a few short hours, their lives would take a horrific turn, leaving a young woman fighting for her life and a community desperate for answers.
All of a sudden, she can smell accelerant. And then she kind of hears a click. And the next thing she knows, she can hear crackling, and it's her hair that's on fire.
Let me see what you got.
LaTanya Bowman and Jamal Rogers had been friends since high school, but it didn't take long for the relationship to become more than mere friendship. In September of 2011, LaTanya became pregnant with Jamal's child. And after shaking off a case of cold feet, Jamal seemed ready to be a loving boyfriend and father.
They sort of rekindled their relationship, I guess, or at least were going to try.
The couple's love for each other seemed so intense that just a few weeks before their child was due, Jamal and LaTanya shared a heated tryst at a local drive-in.
They had sex there in the car, in the SUV at the drive-in that they had went to.
But just when it seemed the couple's relationship couldn't get any more perfect, the unthinkable happened. Early on May 26, 2012, just hours after her and Jamal's romantic evening at the drive-in, LaTanya was abducted from Jamal's garage by an unknown assailant. Bound and gagged, she was lit on fire, shot, and left for dead.
The crime that LaTanya Bowman was a victim of has to rank as one of the most heinous.
I think even for a city like Detroit, the nature of this crime was shocking.
Now as LaTanya fights for her life and the life of her unborn child in the hospital, police begin to try and piece together what happened. But the key to cracking the case comes down to one important factor.
I needed to talk to the victim. I needed to hear what happened firsthand from her.
Shot in the shoulder and suffering from second and third degree burns, LaTonya has been transferred to the hospital trauma unit. But despite her life-threatening injuries, she's remained conscious throughout her ordeal.
LaTonya, I'm Detective Barnes. Just wanted to ask you a few questions, if I could. LaTonya, I know you're hurting, but I'd like to go through the events of last night. Can you just start from the beginning and tell me what happened?
Visibly shaken, LaTonya lays out the frightening details of her abduction.
Jamal and I went to the drive-in, and I drove back home, and he said that he was gonna open the garage door.
Hey, right here. Let me go open up the garage so you can back in.
Okay.
According to LaTonya, Jamal opened the garage. Just as she parked the car, all hell broke loose.
While inside of the garage, an unknown person came up and grabbed her and held a gun to her head.
Get out of the car! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
LaTonya tells detectives she did her best to comply with her assailant's demands.
She's in no condition to fight, being 9 months pregnant, so she just complies with what the gunman asked her to do.
The tape didn't cover the bottom of her eyeglasses, so she was able to sort of see just glimpses of the skin on his wrist.
She never sees the person behind her, but her hands are tied up, her feet are bound, her mouth is taped, and she's thrown in the back seat of the vehicle.
Get in the car! I said, get in there!
With LaTonya bound and blindfolded, her assailant jumped behind the wheel and took off.
Next thing I know, it felt like we were driving.
Everything happened so quickly, LaTonya isn't sure if Jamal is safe and sound inside the house or had also been attacked.
She's thinking to herself, whatever happened to Jamal, but even more importantly, what's happening to me? How do I protect my baby? How do I get out of this?
LaTonya claims her assailant drove for several minutes before stopping in what seemed to be a remote area. LaTonya hoped her nightmare was nearing an end. Unfortunately, things were about to get much worse.
The gunman had opened the door, and then she remembers feeling a liquid being poured on. She could smell a gassy substance. And she said next thing she knew, she was on fire.
As she feels her hair and her body catching fire, she rolls out of the car and begins rolling around frantically trying to put the fire out.
She described the smell of her burning hair, the crackling of her skin burning. It had to be a horrific set of circumstances for her to live through.
But as LaTonya attempted to extinguish the flames, she suddenly heard a loud pop.
She hears 2 gunshots, one of which strikes her. Believing that she'll be dead soon, she instinctively plays dead.
Miss Bowman performed an amazingly heroic act of having the strength while you're still on fire to be able to play dead. It is just an amazing thing given those horrific circumstances. And the assailant then walked away.
LaTonya tells detectives that once she was sure her abductor had fled the scene, she put out the flames and shook herself free from the duct tape binding her hands and feet.
I heard him run off. When I thought that he was gone, I crawled to the car.
She doesn't have her cell phone at the time. That was taken by the gunman. She sees a gas station she's familiar with. She goes and uses the phone there.
LaTonya doesn't call 911. She's less concerned with her own safety than she is her mother's.
Ma, I need for you to leave the house. I'm coming to get you.
She thinks her mother is next, and her mother's in grave danger. And somehow, even without her glasses, even in great pain, she manages to get to her mom's house.
Oh my God, what happened to you? Let's go to the hospital. Move over.
Shocked by the sight of her daughter's condition, her mother jumped in the car and rushed LaTonya to the hospital.
It's incredible that she lived. This young woman was her own hero.
Police are astonished by LaTonya's chilling story. But just what could have prompted the attack? And why was LaTonya so gravely concerned about her mother's safety? Apparently, it wasn't the first time a threat had been made against their family.
She's worried about her mother because 2 weeks earlier, there was an incident where a man came to the door very early in the morning. Mom opens the door. Guy sticks a gun in Mom's face, pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. And he just kind of runs off.
Miss Bowman thought, oh my God, does this have anything to do with that incident? Does this have anything to do with my mother?
Judging by the timing of the two events, LaTonya can't help but fear the worst.
She believes the incident that happened at her house a few weeks earlier is related to what happened to her this evening.
We'll be in touch. Get some rest.
For detectives, LaTonya's statement provides the first break in the case. But before they can follow up on this new lead, they must answer an even more pressing question. Is the father of LaTonya Jamal Rogers alive and well? Or has he met a fate even worse than hers?
Where was Jamal? We needed to go find him.
In Detroit, a terrifying crime has taken place involving the unlikeliest of victims. 9 months pregnant, LaTonya Bowman was abducted, set on fire, and shot. Amazingly, LaTonya tricked her assailant into believing she was dead.
The whole time she's thinking about her baby. And that's what gave her the courage to play dead. It saves her life.
And after her attacker fled the scene, LaTonya made her way to the hospital, but not before checking on her mother to make sure she hadn't been targeted as well.
Mom, been kidnapped.
In speaking with detectives, LaTonya reveals that the assault might be related to a separate incident that occurred only a couple weeks earlier.
2 weeks prior to the attack, an unknown male showed up at LaTonya's mom's house. When she came to the door, he pointed a gun in her face and pulled the trigger. But the gun did not fire. The male then ran off.
Adding to the mystery is the fact that police aren't sure if LaTonya's attacker also went after Jamal, the father of her unborn child. While one team of officers conducts welfare checks at both LaTonya and Jamal's residences, others fan out across the city in an effort to determine the exact location of the vacant lot where the shooter abandoned LaTonya.
Well, the first thing you think of is this guy shoots somebody and then throws the gun in the street someplace and some 3-year-old finds it. It was a top priority to find that gun. The shell casings, anything we could find in relation to the crime.
But given that LaTonya was blindfolded during the attack, locating the crime scene proves easier said than done.
It was difficult for her to describe a lot of the things around her because it was dark.
So we drove around, hoping to find some evidence of the scene. We were unable to do that.
It's not long before detectives hit another roadblock, hoping to establish a possible link between LaTonya's abduction and the earlier threat made on her family. Detectives reach out to her mother, Angela Beatty.
So I understand from LaTonya that you had some sort of confrontation.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago.
But not only is LaTonya's mother unable to ID the man who allegedly threatened her, she's unsure the two events are even related.
I don't really think it has anything to do with LaTonya at all. I just figured somebody might have just been mad.
LaTonya's mom worked for the city, so sometimes you're dealing with irate citizens, etc. And based on that, she felt it had nothing to do with what happened to LaTonya.
Absolutely not.
Just when it seems like the case has hit a dead end,
Barnes,
detectives receive some promising news from their fellow officers.
you have him there.
Jamal Rogers is alive and well.
Thank you for your time. We need to go.
Officers encountered him during the welfare check of his house, the same house where LaTonya was kidnapped. Detectives are eager to hear his version of the attack.
Jamal Rogers?
Yes?
Need to ask you some questions about LaTonya Bowman.
Surprisingly, Jamal's account of what happened couldn't be more different than LaTonya's.
Jamal said that they left the drive-in theater, came back to his house on Sherman, and parked at the curb.
She dropped you off here?
Yeah, she dropped me off. Yeah, we were out there at the curb, talked for about maybe 10 minutes or so. Then I got out and she drove off.
With Jamal's statement at odds with LaTonya's, detectives wonder if Jamal might be withholding information.
You're sure she dropped you at the curb?
Yeah, positive.
That's when Jamal drops a bombshell.
Is there anybody here that can corroborate that?
Yeah, my mom and my girlfriend and my kids.
You have another girlfriend?
Yeah.
And not one, but two children.
This is a guy who's getting a little bit of action because he's got a girlfriend right here and a pregnant pal over here.
Given LaTonya's statement and Jamal's startling revelation, detectives can't help but wonder. Could Jamal's girlfriend have orchestrated LaTonya's abduction out of jealousy? And if so, is Jamal now trying to protect her?
We know that Jamal watched this whole incident happen in his garage. He knew more than he was letting on.
Hoping to get to the bottom of this mystery, detectives reach out to a number of Jamal's neighbors. They're hoping to glean additional information about the attack on LaTonya. Someone in Jamal's neighborhood tells them they saw Jamal and LaTonya return home from the drive-in the night of the crime.
Apparently there's this character who lives in the neighborhood, and this guy had his eyes open, and he saw them go into that garage, backing into the garage with LaTonya.
With an eyewitness backing LaTonya's story, police decide to bring Jamal in for further questioning. Detectives press Jamal to explain why his version of events is so different than either LaTonya's or his neighbor's.
He instructs LaTonya to pull into this detached garage from his home so they can finish what they supposedly started at the movie theater.
Jamal changes his story and says, yeah, they did pull into the garage.
So you're out of the car? Yes. So you had to close the garage door. She obviously didn't do it, right? Yes.
But before Jamal talks about what happened next, he suddenly has a change of heart.
I think I remember. You want a lawyer? Yeah.
Basically, lawyers up, clams up. That's it. He's done.
Jamal's sudden reluctance to talk raises more than a few red flags with detectives. They decide to hold him in county jail on suspicion of murder. But they're still uncertain whether Jamal's girlfriend could be personally involved. Interviewing her that day, detectives are stunned by what she tells them.
What can you tell me about LaTonya Bowman?
I really don't know that name.
I don't believe that either of the women knew of the other.
Okay, well, were you aware that Jamal was seeing Miss Bowman?
No, I was not.
The fact that Jamal's girlfriend has no idea he's been sleeping with LaTonya seemingly undermines any motive she might have to try and kill her. It also places Jamal alone at the top of the suspect list.
We didn't consider the current girlfriend a suspect, and we believed their relationship at that point didn't come into play.
Desperate for physical evidence, investigators turn their attention to LaTonya's SUV.
Her vehicle was seized, and inside the vehicle, there's some pieces of burned clothing, but there was also a roll of black Gorilla duct tape, which we believe that was the duct tape used by the gunman.
However, DNA tests conducted on both the clothing and duct tape failed to connect Jamal or anyone else to the crime. The case appears to be at a standstill.
The only thing I had going for me at the time was kind of a little bit of hope. I wanted Jamal Rogers to talk to me again.
A few hours later, Detective Barnes' hopes are realized when Jamal Rogers does a surprising about-face.
I almost started to move on to what's the next step going to be? How are we going to identify this other person if Jamal Rogers is not going to give him up? And I walked him all the way back to his cell, and just as I put him in his cell, he said, "Can we talk?"
What does Jamal want to say? He's already lied to investigators once. Would this time be any different? Or is Jamal about to provide detectives with a piece of information that will break the case wide open? On May 26, 2012, expectant mother LaTonya Bowman was kidnapped from inside the garage at the home of her boyfriend, Jamal Rogers. LaTonya was then lit on fire, shot, and left to die in a vacant lot.
So she's been on fire, and then she feels a gunshot. She decides to play dead.
Miraculously, LaTonya survived the terrible ordeal, and the subsequent investigation has led police to the father of her unborn child. Jamal Rogers.
We believe that he was complicit in this abduction and attempt murder.
While initially reluctant to cooperate with police, after being taken into custody, Jamal decides to talk.
He tells cops, "I know who did this."
For detectives, it's a much-needed break in the case.
I just told him that I'm not going to go sit down there and speak to you for 2 hours unless you're going to give me something, so you're going to have to give me a name. And he said, Antonio Valentine Mathis.
Antonio Mathis is no stranger to law enforcement.
He's been in jail, he's done some time, and he's just a really bad guy. And he also happens to be pals with Jamal Rogers. He's his roommate.
Jamal described their relationship, said they were like brothers. He'd allowed Antonio to watch his kids. He just trusted him that much.
According to Jamal, he'd recently confided in Antonio about some problems he was having with LaTanya, and his friend offered to lend a hand.
What'd you say to him?
I said I didn't really want to have another baby.
I don't want to have another baby, man. I can't deal with this, that kind of a thing?
Yes.
So he said,
I could take care of it.
Jamal tells detectives he had no idea what Antonio meant when he said he could take care of it, and he was surprised to find Antonio in his garage when he and LaTanya returned home from the drive-in.
I did say something to him when I seen him show to the car. I was just, what are you doing? What are you doing? What is this about? And he's just like, I got you, don't worry about it.
Jamal insists Antonio acted on his own.
I didn't ask him to do it. I didn't ask him to do anything.
Jamal's position was that Antonio took this on his own accord and thought to himself, hey, why don't I help Jamal out and somehow help terminate the baby, get her upset or whatever.
Detectives are anxious to speak with Antonio Mathis. They search the neighborhood where he and Jamal live, but can't find him anywhere. At least not until an unexpected tip comes in.
We received a phone call. It was an anonymous phone call. I learned he was going back over the Sherman address. In fact, our officers were sitting on the crime scene. He was arrested.
Even with Antonio in custody, detectives' hopes of getting a confession are soon dashed.
when they got back at 1:30, you're in the garage.
I never came back to the house that night. I came back to the house the next morning.
He's lying about everything.
I mean, I don't know.
Antonio denies any knowledge of this whole event. He says he just got pointed out as a guy that, because he had a record, he would be a good fall guy.
Antonio also claims he has an airtight alibi. He was with his girlfriend the night of the crime.
She's gonna be your alibi for the whole night.
I mean, that's all it is.
What's her name?
The assailant's alibi was a friend of his, Tanisha McCaddy. She picked him up at midnight and drove him to another girl's house. That girl, Crystal King, was with him at the time of the assault.
Investigators suspect Antonio's alibi is bogus. And after speaking with Crystal King and Tanisha McCaddy, that suspicion is justified.
The timeline that he gave us was totally inconsistent with what had actually happened, according to Tanisha McCaddy and his girlfriend.
Tanisha and Crystal both state that Antonio didn't hook up with them until the morning after the crime, which supports the theory that Antonio was the gunman who attacked LaTanya Bowman. But did Antonio act alone? Or did he and Jamal conspire to murder Jamal's pregnant girlfriend? In order to elicit more information from their two prime suspects, detectives make a bold play.
Cops are pretty clever. You know, they're going to start playing these two guys against each other.
I thought we maybe would talk to Jamal again and see if maybe he'd give us a little bit more.
He claims he's innocent. Wasn't anywhere near you and LaTanya. And he's got an alibi and witnesses.
Man, he lying.
Jamal, you're gonna have to give me something concrete, or I'm gonna have to let him go, and you're gonna go down for the whole thing.
I was kind of acting a little mad at him. I told him, this is your last chance. You're gonna give me some evidence that I can corroborate, or that's it. We're done talking.
The two words Jamal utters next will lead detectives to the unlikeliest of locations. A location that will bring them one step closer to putting LaTanya's true attacker behind bars. Police Police now believe Jamal Rogers is responsible for the attempted murder of LaTanya Bowman, the mother of his unborn child. But Jamal insists he's innocent and pins the crime on his best friend and roommate.
Man, he lying.
He's gonna roll over on his buddy, this guy named Antonio Mathis.
Jamal claims that shortly before the attack on LaTanya, he made an offhand comment about not wanting another child. Unbeknownst to Jamal, Antonio took his comments seriously and without his knowledge, orchestrated the hit on Jamal's pregnant girlfriend. However, when Antonio was arrested, he claims no knowledge of the attack on LaTanya.
Antonio said he didn't do anything. It's all Jamal.
According to Antonio, he was with his girlfriend, Crystal King, and pal, Tanisa McCaddy, the night of the crime. But Crystal and Tanisa tell detectives that's simply not the case.
We knew we had the right guy. The question is, do we have enough to make it stick?
The other question is whether Antonio acted alone, as Jamal Rogers claims, or whether the two men conspired to attack LaTanya.
He's thrown you under the bus. He's going to do whatever he can to save his own ass right now. He already did. He already did. He told us, he told you not to do anything to her. You know what that looks like? You went out and did this on your own.
In an effort to uncover the truth, detectives then decide to play Jamal and Antonio against each other.
Jamal, you're gonna have to give me something concrete, or I'm gonna have to let him go, and you're gonna go down for the whole thing.
Fearful of taking the fall for the crime all by himself, Jamal offers 2 words.
Jamal says,
Home Depot.
I drove him to Home Depot right before I went to go to the movies with LaTanya.
Operating off this information, detectives reach out to a nearby Home Depot. They are able to confirm that the gloves and duct tape found in LaTanya's car were indeed purchased there.
Home Depot was nice enough to provide us with the exact items that he purchased from their shelves. So we had SKU number for the duct tape. We had the exact type of Gorilla duct tape, the exact gloves he bought.
Detectives confront Antonio Mathis with this evidence, but Antonio remains adamant he had nothing to do with the crime.
But I guess he forgot. Home Depot has security cameras.
Police are confident that if the surveillance footage places Antonio at the store, they'll have enough probable cause to charge him with attempted murder. Detective John Barnes screens the security footage, but after 90 minutes, there's still no sign of their prime suspect.
You know, and Antonio hasn't come into the store, and I almost started thinking, what do we do now that we don't have this piece of evidence?
But just as he's about to give up, Detective Barnes finally hits pay dirt.
Right there, look.
I think it was around 9:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the store closed. In walks Antonio Mathis. I knew right then that we'd locked Antonio Mathis into this.
There he goes. He's got the gloves and he's got the duct tape. Yep. That's what we've been looking for.
Even with this video evidence, detectives are still fairly confident that Antonio didn't act alone. They believe Jamal Rogers, already saddled with 2 young children, couldn't bear the thought of having to support another child with LaTanya. And when Antonio told Jamal he could make his problem go away, Jamal jumped at the offer.
I think that Antonio told Jamal, I can take care of this for you. And by take care, we know that means kill her and the baby, and the problem goes away.
On May 29, 2012, police officially charged Jamal Rogers and Antonio Mathis with unlawful imprisonment, assault with intent to commit murder, and conspiracy. News of Jamal's arrest adds insult to LaTanya's already devastating injuries.
I think she loved him, and she didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe that he was capable of something like this. And I could understand.
Ironically, the same day charges are filed against the 2 men, LaTanya gives birth to a healthy baby boy.
The baby is fine. Mom, LaTanya, is apparently recovering physically. This is an incredible story of courage and survival.
Over the next year, LaTanya also begins to heal emotionally as she waits for justice to be served.
She went through some tough times, and we weren't going to rest. Not from day one, not until this is over with, and we get the results that she deserves.
On May 22, 2013, the trial of Jamal Rogers and Antonio Mathis begins in a Macomb County courtroom. In their opening statement, prosecutors assert Jamal Rogers, not wanting to be a father again, asked his friend Antonio Mathis to kill his pregnant girlfriend, LaTonya Bowman.
Obviously, Mr. Mathis was supposed to kill Miss Bowman. She was totally blindsided by the violence that she was subjected to at both of their hands.
Prosecutors then lay out the evidence tying Antonio to the crime: the duct tape and the gloves found in LaTonya's SUV, as well as the security footage that shows Antonio Mathis purchasing them the night of the attack.
Having the Gorilla duct tape in that courtroom and being able to show them, this is what was bought and this is what we found in the car. And them actually seeing that purchase made, that was huge.
After presenting the physical evidence, prosecutors turn to their star witness, LaTonya Bowman. Everyone in the courtroom is mesmerized as she gives a blow-by-blow account of her nightmarish abduction.
She was very calm in her testimony, which is kind of typical of her actions throughout this ordeal. I think the jury was absolutely listening to every word that she said and were undoubtedly impacted.
On the stand, LaTonya admits she had a hard time believing that Jamal was involved in the crime. But she also refutes Jamal's claim that they had sex the night of the abduction.
She denied the sex at the drive-in theater. Jamal seemed to be totally baffled by that, why she's saying that. You know, that was a big part of his case.
But not everything LaTonya testifies to bolsters the prosecution's case. Her inability to concretely identify her assailant is a boon for the defense.
She readily admitted that the defendant was shorter than the man that she felt had abducted her. She really didn't pinpoint my client as being the person that abducted her.
Beyond LaTonya's testimony, the defense also argues that Jamal and Antonio's DNA was never found on the gloves and duct tape, nor was there the usual paper trail left behind when one person solicits another to commit murder on their behalf.
We had shown that there was absolutely no financial things happening between Mr. Rogers and Mr. Mathis. There was no withdrawals or anything like that on Mr. Rogers' part. There was no deposits on top of Mr. Mathis like there normally might be if somebody's asking somebody to commit a crime.
Despite LaTonya's heroic turn on the stand, there seems to be nothing but some security footage linking Antonio to the crime and zero physical evidence implicating Jamal. A guilty verdict seems unlikely. But before the jury weighs in, the prosecution will unveil a surprise witness, one whose shocking testimony will be the deciding factor between two men walking free or being locked up for life. After an intense few days in the courtroom, the trial of Jamal Rogers and Antonio Mathis for the attempted murder of LaTonya Bowman is wrapping up. Armed with a security tape of Antonio purchasing items that were used in the crime, along with LaTonya's gripping testimony, the prosecution is feeling confident.
We were all of the mind that we presented the best case we could possibly present.
But defense attorneys argue there's simply no proof that their clients plotted any murder.
There's no actual concrete evidence of any sort that there was any kind of conspiracy between the people.
However, prosecutors still have one last witness on the docket, Antonio's friend, Tanisa McCaddy. On the stand, Tanisa reveals a detailed conversation she had with Antonio shortly after the attack on LaTonya.
McCaddy. She said he was unusually quiet. And she asked him what was wrong, and he didn't want to tell her. And he just said, nothing, but I need you to stay away from me for a while.
If I remember, the exact words may have been, we did some awful to a pregnant woman. So she did testify to that in court, and that certainly didn't sound good at all.
Well, this guy, Antonio Mathis, is a real brain surgeon. I mean, who actually does something like this? And then they talk about it and even brag about it. But that's what Antonio did, and that's what also helped police nail him to the wall.
But is it enough to convince the jury that both Antonio and Jamal were involved in the crime? After 3 hours of deliberations, the jury returns with their verdict. They find Jamal Rogers and Antonio Mathis guilty on all charges.
The first thing we all did is, after hearing guilty of all charges, is we all looked at Miss Bowman And we all went and hugged her.
2 months later, the two defendants are sentenced to life in prison. The judge has some particularly harsh words for Jamal.
Even though you did not light the match or pull the trigger, you orchestrated perhaps one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. You diabolically and in cold blood plotted, schemed, and arranged the murder of your unborn child.
Jamal, once he's sentenced, basically blows a kiss to the audience. It's incredible arrogance.
For LaTanya Bowman, the sentencing serves as a bittersweet end to her tragic relationship with Jamal. And while the physical and emotional scars wrought by his betrayal still linger, LaTanya refuses to be defined by what happened that fateful night in 2012.
You'd think it just ruined you, and it didn't ruin her. Even though you have these kind of people out there, and this kind of evil out there, that good comes through.
I hope she one day uses this courageous experience of how she was able to save herself and her unborn child, and she can give some counsel to other women. She'll probably save some lives.
The brutal slaughter of her husband admits the truth to save her. Own skin. She traded the father of her son for $50,000 and a clean slate. Kornhart and Mueller are sentenced to life in prison. Karen gets 20 years for cooperating, 20 years for ordering an execution. Sometimes the justice system leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Danny Coleman did not deserve this. He was an asset to this world. He was blindsided by the person he trusted most, sleeping next to a monster for 19 years. We found the truth. We locked him away. But it does not bring Danny back. It just leaves you staring at the walls, wondering how cold a human heart can truly be. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most foolish reasons you can possibly imagine. You look at a man, a good man, and you think his life has value. But to the person sleeping next to him, his life might just be a price tag waiting to be cashed in. It is a cold reality, but it is the reality I have lived with for a very long time. The night of October 22nd, 1992 started like any other quiet night in Franklin County, Missouri. It is a rural area, mostly farmland, woods, and quiet stretches of road. Just past 9 o'clock at night, a motorist driving along Interstate 44 and Stanton saw a glow in the distance. Fire. He walked through a patch of woods and found a pickup truck fully engulfed in flames in the middle of an isolated field. He found a telephone and called the local fire department. When the firefighters arrived and doused the flames, they found something no one ever wants to find. A body, burned beyond recognition, sitting in the front passenger seat. When you find a vehicle completely destroyed by fire with a human being inside, you start asking questions. Who is this? Why are they here? You start from inside of that burned-out shell, and you work your way out. The fire had destroyed almost everything. There was no wallet, no identification. The license plates had been removed by someone hoping to buy themselves time. It was an obvious attempt to delay law enforcement. But criminals, I tell you, they are rarely as smart as they think they are. They took the plates. But they completely forgot about the vehicle identification number etched right into the steel frame of the truck. You have to be kidding me. That single oversight was a thread that would begin to unravel their entire twisted plot. That number traced back to a home in St. Louis, about a 45-minute drive from that lonely field. It belonged to Danny and Karen Coleman. In the middle of the night, investigators knocked on their door. They found Karen and her 18-year-old son, Joby, awake and allegedly worried sick. Danny had not come home. When detectives showed them what survived the fire, a gold chain, a watch, a ring, and a hunting belt buckle, the tears began to fall. But the final piece of the puzzle was a metal rod found in the right leg of the victim. Joby confirmed his father had a pin in his leg from an old motorcycle accident back in 1971 when he was serving in the military. It was Danny. Let's talk about Danny Coleman. Danny was 38 years old, an Army veteran, a mechanical engineer, and a man who loved the outdoors. He walked with a limp from his military days, but he never let it slow him down. He was a good father, a hard worker who even started a side business treating ceramic floors to make them non-slip to provide a better life for his family. He was the kind of guy who taught children how to handle hunting rifles safely. A decent, honest man. He thought he was living the American dream with his wife of 19 years. He trusted her. That was his fatal mistake. Karen Coleman played the part of the grieving widow perfectly. She told police they were a loving couple. No enemies, no dark secrets. But a murder scene always tells the truth, even when the living lie. The medical examiner, Dr. Mary Case, looked at Danny's remains. The fire was meant to cover up the real crime. Danny had suffered massive blunt force trauma to his skull before the fire was ever set. This was not a tragic accident. This was a brutal, calculated homicide. When you investigate a murder, you always look at the spouse. Love and hate are separated by a very thin line, but initially there were no red flags. Detectives interviewed a close friend of Danny named Rich Saluka. There had been some strange, cryptic phone calls between Rich and the Coleman home the night of the murder. But Rich had a solid alibi. He was just a grieving friend. However, Rich did share something crucial. He noticed that Karen was a much rougher person than Danny. And recently, Danny had quietly mentioned they were having marital issues. You pull on that thread, and the whole sweater comes apart. Investigators dug deeper into Karen's life and found a woman leading a secret, toxic double life. She was addicted to methamphetamines and cocaine. She was a drug dealer, and she was a serial cheater. Danny knew about the drugs, and he hated it. He was a straight, laced guy who did not even drink or smoke, and his wife was running around high, destroying everything he had built. He would have divorced her in a heartbeat if he knew the full extent of her betrayals. But Karen did not want a divorce. A divorce means you split the assets. A murder means you get the life insurance, $50,000. That was the price she put on the father of her child. Karen was a manipulator, empty inside, driven only by greed and her next high. She was sleeping with several men, including the husband of her own best friend, an armed robber named Larry Nolan, who was sitting in a Missouri state prison. My, the betrayal runs so deep, it is almost hard to fathom. She used her visits to the prison to seduce Larry, making him believe she loved him. She promised him $15,000 from the insurance money and her hand in marriage if he could arrange to have her husband killed. Larry, blinded by a foolish fantasy of love, agreed. Larry reached out from behind prison walls and contacted an old friend on the outside, a firefighter from the Stanton area named James Cornhart. James recruited a friend named Stephen Mueller and an unidentified man known only as Dozer. Think about the absolute senselessness of this. These men did not know Danny. They had no grievance with him. They agreed to end a good man's life for a few $1,000s. Karen gave them all the details of Danny's routine. On the night of October 22nd, they lured Danny to a vacant house under the pretense of giving him information about Karen's affairs. Danny went because he wanted the truth about his marriage. Instead, he was ambushed. They beat him viciously. Then, as Stephen Mueller would later confess, they shot him. The medical examiner would later find a lead snowstorm in Danny's skull fragments, the metallic debris left behind by bullets. They loaded his body into his own truck, drove it to that field in Stanton, and James Cornhart, a firefighter, set ablaze. But remember the crime scene. Detectives had found a matchbox wrapped in cellophane near the burned truck. They pulled a single latent fingerprint off that wrapper. They had the print, but they had no name to match it to. The case went cold. Years passed. From 1,992 all the way to 1,999. Karen Coleman lived her life, spending the blood money she collected from her husband's death. She dropped Larry Nolan the moment the deed was done. She never paid him the full amount, and she certainly never married him. But secrets have a way of clawing their way out of the grave. Larry Nolan, dying of hepatitis in prison, felt the bitter sting of Karen's betrayal. Before he took his last breath, he confessed the entire murder plot to his cellmate. He did not confess out of guilt or remorse. He confessed out of pure spite because he had been double-crossed. I tell you, there is absolutely no honor among thieves. That confession reached the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the wheels of justice, though slow, began to grind. It took years of meticulous work to build a case that would hold up in federal court. Finally, in 2008, 16 years after Danny Coleman was murdered in the dark, they arrested James Cornhart at his firehouse. They rolled his fingerprints, and what do you know? They matched the print on that cellophane wrapper from the crime scene perfectly. You have a firefighter committing arson to cover up a murder, and he leaves his fingerprint on the matchbox. Astonishing. Then came the wiretaps. James made calls from the county jail, telling his buddy Stephen Mueller to dispose of the murder weapon and a homemade silencer built from a lawnmower muffler. Stephen threw it off a bridge in South St. Louis County, but when investigators brought him in, the guilt was too heavy. Stephen cracked. He told them everything. He admitted he was the one who pulled the trigger. When they finally slapped the cuffs on Karen Coleman, she did what's selfish. Manipulative people always do. She tried to save her own skin. She turned on everyone, claiming her drug addiction made her do it, saying she wanted a fresh start. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy and murder for hire to avoid spending the rest of her life in a cage. In 2010, James Cornhart and Stephen Mueller were sentenced to life in prison. Karen received 20 years. A light sentence for the architect of such misery. But her son, Joby, finally got to see the people who destroyed his family held accountable. Danny Coleman did not deserve what happened to him. He was a man who loved life, betrayed by the person he trusted most, slaughtered for a fistful of dollars by men who did not even know his name. The third man, Dozer, is still out there somewhere, but the truth is out in the light. Humans will always disappoint you, but the evidence never lies. Human beings are peculiar creatures. I tell you, they murder for the most absurd and petty reasons you can possibly imagine. And in their arrogant delusion, they believe they can outsmart the truth, but the truth is patient. It waits in the ashes for as long as it takes. The year was 1992, October 22nd to be precise, when a motorist traveling along the North Service Road in Stanton, Missouri, noticed an orange glow bleeding into the night sky just past 9 o'clock, which led firefighters to a desolate patch of woods where a pickup truck was fully engulfed in flames. Once they managed to douse the inferno, they found something that instantly changed this from a simple vehicle fire to a nightmare, because sitting in the front passenger seat were the charred remains of a human being. Looking at a scene like that, you realize fire is a thief. It steals evidence. It steals identity, and it leaves behind nothing but questions and skeletal remains. But fire cannot destroy everything if you know where to look. We found a gold chain, a ring, a watch, and a belt buckle belonging to a hunting group called Ducks Unlimited, and deep within the ashes, the medical examiner found a metal rod surgically implanted in the victim's right leg. Whoever orchestrated this atrocity thought they were absolute criminal masterminds because they removed the license plates to delay identification. But you have to be kidding me. They completely forgot about the vehicle identification number etched permanently into the steel frame, which is the kind of amateur oversight that always brings killers down. That number led us on a 45-minute drive to St. Louis, straight to the doorstep of a woman named Karen Coleman and her 18-year-old son, Joby, at 2:30 in the morning, when we showed them the jewelry and mentioned the surgical pen. Karen wept and confirmed our worst fears. The body in the truck was her husband of 19 years, 38-year-old Danny Coleman. Now, let me tell you about Danny, because the victims are the ones who truly matter in this dark business. Danny was a good man, a hard-working mechanical engineer who ran a successful flooring business on the side. an Army veteran who was honorably discharged in 1971 after a severe motorcycle accident left him with a lifelong limp and that metal rod in his leg. He was a straight shooter, a man who taught children gun safety, a man who loved the outdoors, and a man who loved his wife dearly. He met Karen in a military hospital when he was recovering from his accident, and he spent the next 2 decades trying to build a comfortable, honest life for his family, entirely unaware that the woman sleeping next to him was harboring a darkness he could not even begin to comprehend. Karen Coleman was living a deeply sinister double life, a hollow shell of a human being consumed by methamphetamines, cocaine, and chronic infidelity. While Danny was working his hands to the bone to provide for her, she was out betraying him in the most vile ways possible, even sleeping with her best friend's husband, an armed robber named Larry Nolan, who was sitting in the Missouri State Penitentiary. Danny was beginning to suspect things. He hated drugs. He had a strong moral compass. And he was getting close to discovering her sordid secrets, which many had to go. Karen was not about to endure a divorce that would leave her with nothing. No. She wanted his $50,000 life insurance policy. She wanted the money without the man, and her psychology here reveals a profound, chilling narcissism. She viewed Danny not as a husband, but as an obstacle in a paycheck. So she manipulated Larry Nolan during her prison visits, weaponizing his pathetic infatuation with her, promising him marriage and $15,000 if he arranged to have her husband slaughtered. Larry, blinded by his own foolish lust from behind bars, reached out to his friend on the outside, a local firefighter named James Cornhart, who agreed to broker this hit for $17,000, eventually roping in another man named Steve Mueller for $1,200, and a mysterious phantom known only as Dozer. These cowardly individuals lured Danny to a vacant house under the guise of discussing Karen's infidelity, preying on his desperate need to save his marriage. When he arrived, they ambushed him, beating him brutally before executing him with 3 silenced gunshots to the head, a fact later confirmed by the medical examiner, who found a alleged snowstorm of bullet fragments in his crushed skull. Then, like the spineless cowards they were, they stuffed Danny into his own truck, drove him to that remote field in Stanton, and set him on fire, hoping to erase their sins. For years, they thought they got away with it. As the calendar turned from 1992 to 1996, and the case grew cold, but Karen made a fatal miscalculation. Once Danny was dead, and she collected her bloody $50,000, she stopped visiting Larry Nolan, dropping him like a bad habit and never paying him a dime. Hell hath no fury like a felon double-crossed. I tell you, by 1999, Larry was dying of hepatitis in prison, and in his bitter, vengeful anger, he made a deathbed confession to his cellmate, laying out the entire conspiracy. It took years to build a trap, but in 2008, federal authorities finally swooped in. They arrested James Cornhart at his firehouse, and the crime lab matched his fingerprints to a discarded matchbook cellophane wrapper found at the crime scene 16 years earlier, proving that evidence never forgets. From jail, Cornhart made a panic phone call to Steve Mueller, begging him to throw a makeshift lawnmower silencer off the Jefferson Barracks Bridge, a call we recorded and used to break Mueller, who confessed to everything. And what did the grieving widow do when the walls finally closed around her? Karen Coleman, the architect of this entire nightmare, flipped on everyone to save her own skin, pleading guilty for a reduced sentence of 20 years. While Cornhart and Mueller received life in prison on June 14, 2010, she blamed the drugs, she blamed her accomplices, showing absolutely zero genuine remorse of the fact that she orchestrated the butchery of the man who gave her everything. Danny Coleman was an asset to this world, a man completely blindsided by the staggering greed and cold-blooded betrayal of his own wife. But in the end, justice caught up to Karen Coleman and her lackeys, proving once again that you can burn the body, you can hide the weapon, and you can lie to the police, but the truth will always rise from the ashes to put you exactly where you belong. Humans are peculiar creatures. They murder for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. But usually, it boils down to two ancient motivations, money and lust. When you combine the two, you get a toxic cocktail that poisons everything it touches. I tell you, in all my years of looking into the dark corners of the human soul, the betrayal of a spouse remains the most chilling. You share a home, you share a life, completely unaware that the person sleeping next to you is coldly calculating the exact payout of your life insurance policy. It was a quiet night on October 22nd, 1992, in Stanton, Missouri. It is a rural stretch of farmland and woods, the kind of isolated place where secrets are easily buried in the dark. Just after 9 o'clock at night, a passing motorist spots a bright blaze out in a lonely field. Firefighters arrive within minutes to extinguish the burning truck. What they find inside is not just a tragedy, it is a statement. A body, burned entirely beyond recognition, is sitting in the front passenger seat. The vehicle is totally gutted. Fire is a violent force that destroys almost everything, but it does not destroy absolutely everything. We have a metal frame, and on that frame, a vehicle identification number. That number leads investigators directly to a man named Danny Coleman. Live instinct, honed over more than a decade of service, urged him to hesitate. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and gently opened the door. Chapter 2, The Way to the Truth. Inside the small closet, the mystery deepened. The elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, were found inside, motionless and bound. The scene was a stark contrast to the peaceful life they had built. Officer Weller, keeping his composure, immediately stepped back into the living room and used his radio to request the support of supervisors and the Specialized Crime Scene Unit. Soon, veteran homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart, arrived. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator with 21 years of experience, was deeply respected for his meticulous approach and his empathetic nature. He viewed his job not merely as solving cases, but as restoring peace to families in their moments of greatest grief. A legacy of hard work and community. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, like many in the vibrant Vietnamese community of Arlington, which had flourished since the late 1970s. They brought with them a deep love for their heritage and a strong work ethic. Plus, the Nguyen family legacy. Plus, year of immigration, 2000. Primary business, commercial sewing and garment design. Key achievements, prestigious commercial contracts. Family values, unity, respect, and cultural preservation. Plus, they had established a commercial sewing business, enlisting the help of their son-in-law, Chow, who spoke fluent English and became the public face of the enterprise. For nearly a decade, the business thrived, even securing lucrative contracts with major entertainment giants to manufacture garments. They were a prominent, beloved couple in the neighborhood, known for their generosity and sweet temperaments. However, by the year 2011, the business faced significant challenges. A major contract had ended, and financial stress began to weigh heavily on the family. In times of difficulty, people often look to their deepest beliefs for guidance and hope. For Long and Hong, this meant turning to the traditional spiritual customs of their homeland, seeking a way to lift what they perceived as a streak of bad luck. Chapter 3, The Search for Guiding Lights. In their search for spiritual reassurance, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed to possess the ability to remove bad luck, lift obstacles, and bring prosperity back to struggling families. Hoping to revitalize their family business, Chow made the drive to Houston to consult with Daphne. She performed traditional rituals designed to restore positive energy, filling the family with renewed optimism. They returned to Arlington believing that their fortunes would soon turn around. Misguided trust. Unfortunately, as the months passed, the financial situation did not improve. Rather than seeking alternative business strategies, the family continued to invest their remaining resources into Daphne's spiritual rituals. Over time, the cost of these services accumulated into a staggering debt, estimated to be between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigators began to piece together the family's history, they discovered that the pressure of this debt had created an environment of intense anxiety. Yet on the surface, the family kept up appearances, celebrating Long's birthday with a joyful gathering just hours before the tragedy occurred. Chapter 4. The Clues Left Behind. At the crime scene, investigators discovered several unusual items that seemed designed to paint a specific picture. A light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a glass bottle, traces of herbal substances left on a table, crushed tablets arranged in a visible manner. Initially, these items suggested the involvement of local youth groups or neighborhood gangs, which occasionally use specific colors to mark their presence. However, Detective Stewart remained skeptical. The scene felt almost too deliberately arranged, as if someone were trying very hard to point the blame away from the household. Sometimes, a scene that looks too perfect is actually a stage. Detective Stewart noted during a briefing, "We must look beyond the obvious clues to find the true story." The forensic breakthrough. The crime scene unit meticulously gathered evidence, collecting hair fibers, processing the adhesive tape for fingerprints, and submitting the herbal remnants for genetic analysis. Meanwhile, they conducted interviews with over 50 neighbors, friends, and community members, all of whom spoke of the couple with the utmost respect and affection. For a long time, the lead seemed to grow cold. The genetic profiles obtained from the scene did not match any existing records in the national databases. But justice, though sometimes slow, is persistent. In the year 2015, 3 years after the initial investigation, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected place. A young man named Willie Guillory was detained in Houston on an unrelated charge involving the taking of a horse. Because he had recently reached adulthood, his genetic profile was entered into the database for the first time. Within days, a notification flashed on the screens of the Arlington Police Department. A perfect match had been found between Willie's profile and the evidence recovered from the apartment in 2012. Chapter 5. Unraveling the Threads. Detective Stewart and his team immediately brought Willie in for questioning. Though initially hesitant, the young man was moved by the detective's earnest appeal to his conscience. Willie, who had been only 16 years old at the time of the incident, broke down and explained that he had been guided by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Bobby, a 52-year-old resident of Katy, Texas, had been facing severe financial hardships in 2012. According to Willie, Bobby had been approached by Daphne Wright, who offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington. Daphne, frustrated by the outstanding spiritual debt, had devised a plan to collect on the substantial life insurance policies held by the family, which totaled over $1 million. Plus, the chain of connections. Plus, Daphne Wright, spiritual advisor / mastermind, promised $10,000 to Bobby Guillory, recruited for the task. Brought along Willie Guillory, leaving key evidence behind. Plus, when Bobby was subsequently arrested, he cooperated with investigators, expressing deep regret for his actions. He revealed that the key to the apartment had been provided directly to him, suggesting that the plan had received assistance from someone close to the family. Chapter 6. The Power of Hope and Justice. As the full picture emerged, the community of Arlington rallied together, offering support to the surviving family members and emphasizing the importance of transparency, mutual trust, and healthy family bonds. The trial of Daphne Wright, which began in August of 2019, drew significant attention as a cautionary tale about the dangers of misplaced trust and extreme greed. Throughout the proceedings, the strength of the community was on full display. Neighbors spoke of the warmth and love that Long and Hong had brought to their lives, choosing to remember their bright smiles and beautiful sewing creations rather than the tragedy that had briefly touched them. A community restored. Ultimately, the justice system worked diligently to ensure that those responsible were held accountable. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though some questions remain regarding the full extent of everyone's involvement, the resolution of the case brought a profound sense of closure to Arlington. The story served as a powerful reminder of the values of hard work, honest communication, and the importance of seeking help through legitimate, supportive community channels. Today, the legacy of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee lives on in the hearts of their children and grandchildren, who continue to honor their memory by building a life filled with kindness, unity, and hope. The dark clouds have parted, leaving behind a community that is stronger, more vigilant, and deeply bound by love. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, always seemed to carry a promise of warmth and quiet industry. On the 10th of June in the year 2012, at exactly 7:29 in the morning, that peaceful sky was met with the anxious ring of an emergency telephone line. In the quiet suburbs, where the manicured lawns met the bustling business districts, a 38-year-old immigrant named Chow Tran stood outside a modest apartment complex. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed the telephone to his ear, his voice cutting through the early morning air with a mixture of fear and confusion. When an emergency dispatcher answered, Chow struggled to find the words to describe the heavy weight settling in his chest. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, two beloved members of the local community who had suddenly gone silent. "Can you give me their names?" the dispatcher asked, her voice a calm anchor in the rising tide of Chow's anxiety. "My dad's name is Long," Chow replied, spelling out slowly to ensure there was no mistake. "Last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now. My mother-in-law is Hong Lee." As the call progressed, the fear within the family gathered outside grew more palpable. Chow explained that his teenage son and his wife had gone to knock on the door, hoping for a simple answer. Perhaps that the elderly couple had merely overslept or forgotten the time. But there was no sound from within. The door remained firmly locked. It was then that they noticed the window to the residence was open, a small but deeply troubling detail that shattered the peaceful facade of the morning. Terrified to step inside and face what might lie beyond the threshold, the family huddled together on the pavement, waiting anxiously for the arrival of the police. Chapter 2. The Open Window. It did not take long for the first patrol vehicle to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the force, pulled up to the apartment complex and immediately sensed that this was no ordinary call. Usually, welfare checks came later in the day, after hours of missed appointments or unreturned calls. To receive one so early in the morning, with an entire family gathered on the lawn in silent terror, was highly unusual. Weller approached the open window, his senses on high alert. The apartment within appeared to be in complete disarray, displaying the classic signs of a burglary. Stepping through the entrance, he called out into the quiet rooms, his voice echoing off the walls. "Hello? Is anyone home? This is the police." There was no answer. Weller moved to the living room, noting the upturned furniture and scattered items. He checked the kitchen, then the bathroom, finding both empty. The only room left was the bedroom. He stepped inside, shining his flashlight into the corners, but at first glance, the room appeared vacant. Relieved, he turned to leave, thinking perhaps the couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to clear their heads after a stressful week. But as he reached for the doorframe, his flashlight caught something unusual. Next to a very small closet door, there were distinct hand smudges on the wall, as if someone had reached out in a moment of desperation. A sudden instinct, born of 14 years of experience on the force, told him to pause. Everything inside him hesitated, but his duty pushed him forward. He reached out, grasped the handle, and pulled the closet door open. Inside the cramped space lay the elderly couple, bound tightly with duct tape. There was no life left in them. The sheer brutality of the scene left the veteran officer in complete shock. For a long moment, Weller stood frozen in the middle of the living room, unable to speak or even use his radio. When he finally found his voice, he called for a supervisor and a crime scene unit, knowing that the peace of this community had just been shattered. Chapter 3: The Legacy of the Sewing Room. To understand the profound tragedy of that morning, one must look back to the year 2000, when Long Nguyen and Hong Lee first arrived in the United States from Vietnam. Like many before them, they brought very little in the way of material wealth, but they possessed an abundance of hope, time-honored traditions, and a deep love for their family. They chose Arlington as their new home, drawn by the vibrant and supportive Vietnamese community that had flourished there since the late 1970s. Long and Hong were determined to build a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. They established a commercial sewing business, pouring their hearts into every stitch. To help bridge the gap with the English-speaking market, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran, to manage contractor relations and serve as the public face of the enterprise. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off. Their dedication earned them lucrative contracts with major commercial giants, including Disney. They were viewed as a prominent, successful family, deeply respected by their neighbors and peers. But by the year 2011, the tide of fortune began to turn. The contract with Disney was lost, and the business began a slow, agonizing decline. In times of great hardship, the family turned to the traditional beliefs of their homeland. For generations, their culture held a deep respect for spiritual advisors who could perform rituals to ward off bad luck, protect wealth, and lift curses. Searching for a solution, Chow and his mother-in-law found an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed the power to remove negative energy and bring good fortune back to struggling families. Desperate to save their business, Chow and Hong traveled to Houston for a consultation. They participated in a traditional ritual, leaving the meeting filled with renewed hope that their commercial fortunes would soon be restored. Chapter 4: The Blue Bandana. As the homicide investigators, led by Detective Stewart, began their work in the apartment, they searched for any clue that might explain who could commit such a heinous act against 2 gentle elders. The physical evidence at the scene was puzzling. In the living room, they found a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table and a marijuana cigarette. More strikingly, a light blue bandana was wrapped around a beer bottle, left in plain sight. To the detectives, these items felt almost too deliberate, like a calling card left by one of the local gangs known to operate in the area. Arlington had seen its share of gang activity, and the color of the bandana matched known symbols of certain groups. However, Detective Stewart, a veteran of 21 years in homicide, remained skeptical. Sometimes things seem too perfect, Stewart remarked to his team. It is almost as if someone wanted us to find these things. This might not be a robbery gone bad at. Oh, it looks staged. The team collected every scrap of evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and swabs of blood, sending them to the laboratory for forensic analysis. They also began interviewing family members and neighbors, trying to piece together the final hours of the couple's lives. Chow Tran, acting as the spokesperson for the family, explained that they had all gathered the previous evening to celebrate Long's birthday. According to Chow, The elderly couple had a wonderful time, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home. When asked if the couple kept large sums of cash at home, Chow admitted that while some traditional immigrants preferred to keep their savings close, his in-laws had very little left due to the failing business. Chapter 5. The Shadow of the Policy. A few days into the investigation, a routine phone call shifted the direction of the case entirely. Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company inquiring about a life insurance policy associated with the deceased couple. To the detective's surprise, the policy was valued at over $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran himself. When questioned about the substantial policy, Chow explained that it had been established to ensure the survival of the family's sewing business in the event of a tragedy. He cooperated fully with the police, providing a detailed timeline of his whereabouts and agreeing to provide his DNA and fingerprints. When the laboratory results returned, the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the crime scene did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile within the national database. Without a match, the investigation began to stall. Detectives interviewed more than 50 people, but no solid leads emerged. The months stretched into years, and the files were placed in the cold case in Arlington. The young man became overwhelmed and broke down. He confessed his involvement, but insisted that he had not acted alone. He revealed that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to participate in what was presented as a trip to Arlington to assist with a specific task. According to Willie, they had traveled from Houston to Arlington on June 9th, 2012. He claimed that his uncle possessed a key to the apartment, allowing him to enter without forcing the door. Once inside, they had intentionally scattered items, left a beer bottle wrapped in the blue bandana, and placed the pills and marijuana cigarette to create the illusion of a gang-related burglary. When the elderly couple returned home, a physical struggle ensued. Willie admitted to assisting his uncle in restraining the couple, after which they were secured with duct tape and placed in the bedroom closet before the two men departed back to Houston. When pressed by detectives as to why they would target an elderly couple they did not know, Willie pointed to a spiritual advisor in Houston named Daphne Wright. He explained that his uncle had met with Daphne, who claimed that a family owed her a substantial amount of money and had refused to pay. According to Willie, Daphne had suggested that if the debt could not be resolved, she wanted the individuals involved permanently removed, orchestrating the plan and providing the key to the residence. With this crucial testimony, investigators moved swiftly to locate Bobby Guillory. In December of 2015, detectives located the 52-year-old Bobby at his residence in Katy, Texas, and placed him under arrest. Faced with the reality of the charges and the confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate, expressing deep remorse and fear. Bobby confirmed that he had been experiencing severe financial difficulties in 2011 after losing his job. He claimed that Daphne Wright had approached him, offering him $10,000 to carry out the task. He portrayed Daphne as a powerful figure who managed her clients with extreme authority, operating almost as a spiritual creditor. Bobby explained that the financial arrangement between Daphne and the sewing family had grown extraordinarily complicated over many months. Chow Tran and Hong Lu had continuously sought Daphne's spiritual services on credit, believing that her rituals were essential to saving their business. Over time, this accumulated debt had ballooned to an immense sum estimated to be between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family was unable to produce the funds. Knowing that the couple held significant life insurance policies, Daphne allegedly realized that the payout from these policies could resolve the outstanding debt. According to Bobby, Daphne had instructed him on how to proceed, even providing him with a key to the apartment, a key that she claimed to have received directly from Chow Tran. Part 5. The Scales of Justice. The investigation now turned its full attention to Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, detectives visited her home in Houston. She lived a seemingly structured life with her husband and 3 daughters, presenting herself as a strong, direct presence within her household and community. When questioned, Daphne acknowledged that she knew Chow Tran as a client, but declined to provide details regarding their financial transactions. She maintained a calm, distant demeanor, offering no assistance to the investigators. Undeterred, detectives secured an arrest warrant and a search warrant for her residence. During the search of her home, investigators discovered detailed financial ledgers. These records revealed that Daphne charged substantial fees, ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for her spiritual services, which included rituals to alter fortunes and address personal disputes. Her husband, Howard, cooperated with the police, maintaining his complete ignorance of any criminal activity and asserting his belief in his wife's innocence. To build a successful prosecution against the primary organizer of the crime, the state recognized the necessity of securing definitive testimony. In 2015, financial investigators subpoenaed Chow Tran's records, discovering that following the passing of his in-laws, he had purchased a new home, and the sewing business had been permanently closed. Under the guidance of his legal counsel, Chow eventually agreed to speak with prosecutors. He presented a narrative in which his family had felt completely dominated by Daphne's perceived spiritual authority. He claimed that they believed she possessed the power to cast devastating curses as easily as she could lift them, leaving them in a state of constant fear regarding their unresolved debt. Chow made the startling assertion that his mother-in-law, Hong Le, had grown so desperate to protect her family from spiritual harm that she had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy Daphne. He claimed that Daphne had embraced the idea, insisting that both elderly parents must pass away to ensure the insurance payout would cover the entirety of the debt. While investigators found the notion of Hong volunteering for such a fate highly implausible, they recognized that Chow's testimony was vital to securing a conviction against Daphne. In exchange for his full cooperation and testimony, prosecutors offered Chow immunity. The trial of Daphne Wright commenced on August 26, 2019. Chow Tran took the stand, describing Daphne as an exceptionally demanding and manipulative individual who would stop at nothing to secure the funds she believed she was owed. The defense vigorously challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he had fabricated the story of spiritual coercion to obscure his own financial motives. They pointed out the complete lack of written documentation, emails, or receipts verifying the existence of a $280,000 debt. The defense contended that Chow had orchestrated the plan to secure the $850,000 in insurance benefits for his own personal enrichment, highlighting that he had received immunity while remaining deeply complicit. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury deliberated carefully on the evidence presented, including the testimonies of Willie and Bobby Guillory. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charges of capital murder. Daphne Wright was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of the trial brought a quiet end to a long and painful chapter for the community. For the detectives who had dedicated years of their lives to uncovering the truth, the outcome was bittersweet. While the individuals who carried out the physical act and the person who organized it were held accountable, the immunity granted to Chow Tran remained a point of professional contemplation. Yet, the primary focus remained on honoring the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two hardworking individuals who had ventured across the world to build a legacy of love and unity for their family. Their journey, marked by hope, perseverance, and an enduring commitment to their heritage, serve as a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the quiet, persistent pursuit of justice. The summer sun of Texas had a way of baking the pavement until the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat, but on the morning of June 10th, 2012, the air in Arlington carried a different kind of stillness. It was early, just past 7:29 in the morning, when the quiet of a residential neighborhood was broken by the arrival of a police cruiser. Officer Weller, a seasoned responder with 14 years of service, guided his patrol car to a halt outside an apartment complex. He had received a dispatch for a welfare check, a routine call that usually ended with a simple explanation, an oversleeping relative, a misplaced telephone, or a brief trip to the market. But as he stepped out into the humid morning air, he saw a family gathered on the sidewalk, their faces etched with a deep, silent worry. Among them was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who had made the call. Chow was the primary link between his family and the wider English-speaking community of Arlington. Having worked closely with his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, Chow explained to the officer that they had come to check on the elderly couple, only to find the apartment silent. The family had noticed a window slightly ajar, a detail that filled them with an inexplicable dread. They stood outside, too terrified to cross the threshold themselves. Officer Weller walked up to the apartment door, calling out as he entered. The living room was in complete disarray. Compact discs were scattered across the floor, drawer handles hung open, and furniture had been pushed aside as if in a hurried search for valuables. It bore all the traditional hallmarks of a burglary. He searched the kitchen, then the bathroom. Finding nothing, he walked into the quiet bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and Weller felt a brief wave of relief. He assumed the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the heat, leaving their home vulnerable to an opportunistic thief. But as he turned to leave, the beam of his flashlight caught a series of dark hand smudges on the wall next to a small, narrow closet. A sudden hesitation took hold of him. A veteran's instinct whispered that something was deeply wrong behind that closet door. Taking a breath, he pulled it open. Inside the cramped space lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound with heavy duct tape, their heads wrapped tightly. The sheer brutality of the scene left the officer in a state of profound shock. He stepped back out into the living room, unable to speak, unable to even use his radio for several long moments. When he finally regained his composure, he requested immediate assistance from a supervisor and the homicide unit. Soon, Detective Stewart and his team from the Arlington Police Department arrived. Stewart, a veteran with 21 years in homicide, found himself shaken by the senseless violence inflicted upon an elderly, defenseless couple. The physical evidence pointed toward a robbery gone wrong, but the extreme nature of the binding suggested something far more personal. On the coffee table, investigators found unusual items designed to look like the remnants of a wild night: a plate of crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Tied around a nearby beer bottle was a light blue bandana. To some, this would suggest the involvement of local street gangs, which were known to operate in parts of the region. However, Detective Stewart remained skeptical. The scene felt too perfectly arranged, almost like a stage play designed to lead investigators down a false path. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking to build a legacy for their children and grandchildren. They had established a commercial sewing business in Arlington, a city with a vibrant and industrious Vietnamese community. For a time, their business flourished, even securing contracts with major entertainment brands. But by 2011, their fortunes had shifted. A major contract was lost, and the business began to struggle under a mountain of debt. In their search for a solution, the family turned to traditional beliefs. They sought the assistance of a spiritual advisor who advertised services to lift curses and bring good fortune. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law had traveled to Houston to consult with a woman named Daphne Wright. Daphne promised to restore their luck, but instead of relief, the family found themselves trapped in an escalating financial arrangement. The fees for her rituals accumulated rapidly. eventually growing to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation proceeded, the medical examiner revealed that the cause of death was suffocation due to the extensive duct tape wrapped around the victims' faces. The brutality of the act reinforced the detective's belief that this was not a simple burglary. A breakthrough occurred when the insurance company contacted Detective Stewart regarding a life insurance policy on the couple worth over $1 million. The primary beneficiary was Chow Tran. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of a tragedy. Chow and his family possessed solid alibis for the night of the murders, having attended a birthday celebration that lasted late into the evening. For over 2 years, the case grew cold. DNA collected from a marijuana cigarette left at the scene did not match any profiles in the national database. Then, in 2015, a man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony horse theft in Houston. Because of his new felony conviction, his DNA was entered into the national system. It was an exact match for the sample recovered from the crime scene. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old. When confronted by detectives with the DNA evidence, Willie broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. His uncle, Bobby Guillory, had brought him along to Arlington. Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to stage the robbery. More importantly, Willie revealed that the entire plot had been orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Daphne had demanded her money, and when the family could not pay, she declared that she wanted them dead, so the insurance policies could be collected. In December of 2015, police arrested Bobby Guillory. Facing capital murder charges, Bobby confessed to his role, confirming that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He also dropped a bombshell. Daphne had obtained the apartment key directly from Chow Tran. The revelation of Chow's involvement stunned investigators. It appeared that Chow, desperate to escape the massive debt and under the intense psychological influence of Daphne, had agreed to the plan. He had left the key under a mat for the conspirators to find. To secure a conviction against Daphne Wright, whom prosecutors viewed as the mastermind and puppet master of the entire tragedy, they offered Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his full and honest testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow testified extensively, describing Daphne as a greedy and controlling figure who held immense sway over his family's decisions. The defense argued that Chow was using the spiritual advisor as a scapegoat to pocket the insurance, pay out for himself, pointing out the lack of written documentation regarding the massive debt. The jury ultimately found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in crime, although Chow Tran walked free due to his immunity agreement. The investigators maintained their belief that justice, in its own way, would eventually find its balance for everyone involved. The warmth of the Texas sun in early summer always had a way of reminding Long Gwyn of his youth. In the quiet, green outskirts of his homeland, it was a gentle warmth, the kind that settled deep into bones and promised that, no matter how difficult the journey had been, the earth would always offer a place to rest, to build and to grow. Alongside his beloved wife, Hong Lu, Long had spent his entire life believing in the quiet power of patience, hard work, and the invisible threads of destiny that connected human souls. To understand their journey is to understand the quiet strength of those who carry their entire world in a few suitcases, crossing vast oceans in search of a peaceful harbor. When the couple first arrived in the United States of America in the year 2000, they did not see a foreign land of cold concrete. They saw a grand, open canvas where their children and grandchildren could write stories of joy, achievement, and security. They settled in Arlington, a bustling city nestled in Tarrant County, where the breeze carried the laughter of a diverse and thriving Vietnamese community. For more than a decade, their home was a sanctuary of sweet aromas, traditional melodies, and the steady, rhythmic hum of sewing machines. Long and Hong had established a commercial sewing business, transforming simple fabrics into beautiful garments. It was a family endeavor, drawing their children and their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who possessed a fluent English and charismatic presence needed to represent the business to local contractors. For many years, the family thrived, even securing a wonderful and lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, bringing magic to children across the nation. But life, much like the changing seasons, is rarely a straight path of uninterrupted sunshine. By the year 2011, the grand contract had concluded, and the gentle hum of the sewing machines began to slow. In moments of quiet anxiety, the human heart often looks backward, seeking comfort in the ancient traditions and spiritual beliefs of the ancestors. Long and Hong, like many before them, believed that the flow of prosperity was governed by unseen spiritual forces, and that sometimes a helping hand was needed to lift the heavy clouds of misfortune. It was this search for hope that led the family to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. Through a local newspaper, they discovered a woman named Daphne Wright, who operated from Houston, some 250 miles away. She promised to lift curses, restore harmony, and bring back the golden days of abundance. What began as a sincere quest for peace, however, gradually became a complicated web of reliance, debt, and deep spiritual worry. On a quiet Sunday morning on June 10, 2012, the peaceful silence of the Arlington neighborhood was broken by a call to emergency services. Chow Tran requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, noting that they had not answered their door and that a window to their apartment was unusually open when the first responding officers arrived. They were met by a worried family waiting anxiously outside. Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience, approached the residents with a calm and reassuring demeanor. Upon entering, the apartment showed signs of a sudden and chaotic intrusion. Items were scattered, and the usual pristine order of the elderly couple's home was replaced by disarray. Moving cautiously through the rooms, the officer eventually discovered the tragic truth within a small bedroom closet. The beloved elders Long and Hong had been targeted in a terrible act of greed. The initial examination suggested a staged scene designed to mimic the chaotic patterns of local street gangs. A light blue bandana wrapped around a bottle and scattered personal items were left behind as a false trail. Yet, the seasoned homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart with 21 years of service, quickly realized that this was not a random burglary. It was far too deliberate, far too personal. The investigation that followed became a testament to the tireless dedication of the local police force, who refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade into the cold archives of unsolved cases. For more than 2 years, the team pursued every potential lead, interviewing dozens of neighbors, family members, and associates, leaving no stone unturned. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through a remarkable twist of fate. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been a minor at the time of the offense, was arrested in Houston on an unrelated charge. His DNA profile, newly entered into the national database, provided a perfect match to a small piece of evidence recovered from the Arlington apartment. When questioned by investigators, Willie broke down and revealed the truth. He had been led into the scheme by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, under the direction of the spiritual advisor, Daphne Wright. The plot had been born not out of gang rivalry, but out of a terrible, misplaced sense of financial desperation and greed surrounding the family's outstanding debts and life insurance policies. Bobby Guillory was soon apprehended, and he too confessed, confirming that Daphne Wright was the central coordinator who had organized the plan, believing she could claim the family's assets. The key to the apartment had been left under a mat, a tragic detail that pointed to an insider's compliance. In August of the year 2019, the wheels of justice turned fully. Daphne Wright was brought to trial, where the details of her spiritual business and the heavy financial burdens she placed on her clients were laid bare before a jury. Despite the complex nature of the testimonies, the truth prevailed. Daphne was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she could never again exploit the faith and hope of vulnerable families. Though the legal journey left some questions lingering regarding the full extent of everyone's involvement, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu remains a shining beacon of love, resilience, and family devotion. They are remembered not by the shadows of their final moments, but by the decades of warmth, laughter, and beautiful garments they created, wrapping their community in the enduring embrace of their heritage. The morning sun always had a way of softening the harsh edges of Arlington, Texas, casting a golden, warm glow over the sprawling suburban landscapes. For many years, this city had been a sanctuary for families seeking new beginnings, a place where different cultures interlace like threads in a grand, colorful tapestry. Among those who had crossed oceans to weave their own thread into this community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They were a couple who carried the quiet dignity of their homeland, Vietnam, in every step they took, possessing a warmth that endeared them to everyone they met. They had lived lives of honest labor, building a commercial sewing business from the ground up with the hope of leaving a lasting legacy. For their 3 children and grandchildren, their lives were defined by deep family bonds, a shared history of resilience, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Yet, on the morning of June the 10th, 2012, that peaceful dream was shattered in a way that left even the most seasoned investigators in a state of profound disbelief. It began at 7:29 in the morning with a phone call to emergency dispatchers. The voice on the other end belonged to 38-year-old Chow Tran, a Vietnamese immigrant and the son-in-law of the elderly couple. His voice carried a tremor of deep worry as he requested a welfare check on his in-laws, explaining that they were not answering their door and that things at their apartment did not look right. Chow explained that his father-in-law, Long, was in his 70s, and that his family had gathered outside the residence. Too terrified by the unusually open window and the eerie silence to venture inside themselves, when the responding officers arrived at the quiet apartment complex, they immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. It was rare to receive such requests so early in the morning, and the sight of an entire family standing outside in the morning chill, paralyzed by anxiety, signaled that something was terribly wrong. Upon entering the apartment, the signs of what appeared to be a burglary in progress were everywhere. The rooms were in disarray, with drawers pulled out and items scattered across the floor. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, moved through the quiet home, calling out into the silence. There was no response. The living room, kitchen, and bathroom were completely empty. At first glance, the bedroom also appeared vacant. Relieved, the officer turned to leave, thinking perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk. But as he turned back toward the door, his flashlight beam caught a series of small, dark-hand smudges on the wall next to a narrow closet. A sudden, chilling intuition urged him to hesitate. Following his duty, he slowly pulled open the closet door. Inside, the tragic reality of what had occurred was laid bare. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were gone, their lives taken in an unspeakably violent and cruel manner. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were covered in layers of the thick adhesive. The scene was incredibly chaotic and bloody, indicating a fierce struggle. For the responding officer, the sight was a devastating shock that momentarily stole his ability to speak or even use his radio to call for backup. When the homicide detectives arrived, led by veterans who had spent over 21 years investigating the city's darkest corners, they too were deeply shaken. It was clear that the couple had been subjected to severe physical force before their passing. Initial clues scattered around the apartment seemed to point in many directions. There was a plate with crushed prescription pills on a table, a discarded marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the investigators, these items felt almost too deliberate, like a carefully staged theatrical scene. The light blue bandana was a color often associated with active local gangs known for extorting local businesses, and at first, a robbery or gang extortion gone wrong seemed like the most logical theory. Yet, experienced detectives knew that sometimes things that appear too perfect are designed to mislead. Real gang members rarely left such neat, obvious calling cards after committing such extreme crime. They suspected the scene had been staged to throw them off the track. As the community mourned the loss of the sweet, generous couple who had never bothered a soul, the police began the painstaking process of interviewing family members and collecting forensic evidence. Because Chow Tran spoke the most fluent English, he became the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. He explained to detectives that the family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home. That was the last time anyone admitted to seeing them alive. Chow painted a picture of a sewing business that, despite their best efforts, had fallen on hard times. They had once secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, even producing items for Disney. But by 2011, that contract was lost, and the business began a steep downward spiral. Desperate to save their livelihood and protect their family from financial ruin, the couple turned to the deeply rooted spiritual traditions of their youth. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces sudden, overwhelming misfortune such as bankruptcy or severe legal trouble, they seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals and ward off perceived curses. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to lift powerful curses and bring immense good fortune to those in need. Hoping to turn their luck around, Chow and Hong traveled to Houston to consult with Daphne. She performed elaborate rituals, promising that their business would soon flourish once more. But rather than bringing prosperity, this relationship marked the beginning of a much darker chapter. Over the course of a year, as the business continued to struggle, the family became deeply indebted to Daphne. She ran her spiritual services on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned to an astronomical sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation into the murders deepened, detectives uncovered a major financial detail. The elderly couple had life insurance policies totaling at least $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. When questioned about the policy, Chow maintained that it was a standard business precaution meant to ensure the family could sustain the sewing business if one of them were to pass away. He and his family provided what appeared to be airtight alibis for the night of the crime, explaining they had been playing cards together until late in the evening. For over 2 years, the case remained cold. The forensic samples collected from the crime scene, including the DNA from the discarded marijuana cigarette, did not match anyone in the national databases. It was a frustrating period of silence for the investigators, who refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade. The breakthrough finally came in 2015, triggered by an entirely unrelated and almost bizarre event. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston because he had been a 16-year-old minor at the time of the murders in 2012. His DNA had never been entered into a national database. But as an adult felon in 2015, his profile was finally registered, triggering an immediate and perfect match with the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette at the Arlington crime scene. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the young man quickly broke down. He confessed that he had been present, but insisted he was merely a follower. He pointed the finger at his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, who had enlisted his help for a job in Arlington. According to Willie, they had been given a key to the apartment to stage a burglary. And the entire crime scene, including the bandana, the pills, and the marijuana, had been carefully set up to make it look like the work of local gang members. Most shocking of all was Willie's revelation that the entire crime was a murder-for-hire plot, orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Willie recalled hearing Daphne tell his uncle that the family owed her a vast sum of money, and that if they did not pay up, she wanted them dead. Armed with this information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory in December of 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, also confessed, expressing deep remorse and fear. He admitted that Daphne had targeted his financial desperation, offering him $10,000 to carry out the deed. He revealed that Daphne had learned of the substantial life insurance policies and saw them as the only way to collect the massive debt she felt she was owed. Bobby then dropped a final, stunning bombshell. He claimed that the key to the apartment had come directly from Chow Tran. Detectives were stunned by this revelation of familial betrayal. They focused their efforts on Daphne Wright, arresting her at her Houston home in late 2016. A search of her residence revealed detailed business ledgers showing she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services and curse removals. Despite her cold and defiant demeanor, the evidence against her was mounting. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as an incredibly greedy and manipulative woman who exercised a powerful, almost hypnotic control over his mind and body. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so terrified of Daphne's spiritual wrath that she had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. While investigators found this claim highly implausible, Chow's testimony was crucial. He admitted to leaving the apartment key under a doormat for the perpetrators under Daphne's instructions. In September of 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy, though the lack of charges against Chow Tran left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives who had dedicated years to the case. They found solace in knowing that the truth had finally been brought into the light. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls who had crossed the world in search of a peaceful life, was honored by the tireless pursuit of justice, leaving a powerful lesson about the dangers of greed and the enduring strength of truth. Chapter 1: The Horizon of a New Beginning. The sun rose over Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden hue across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. To the passing traveler, this was a city of progress, a place where concrete highways intersected with green parks, and where the gentle hum of morning traffic whispered of daily routines and honest labor. But to the families who had traveled across oceans to settle here, it was something far greater. It was a physical manifestation of a promise, the sanctuary where dreams, once whispered in the quiet nights of distant lands, could finally take root and flourish. Among those who had found their peace in this bustling community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, carrying with them very little in the way of material wealth, but possessing an abundance of hope, a profound dedication to hard work, and a deep reverence for their heritage. They were a gentle couple, known to their neighbors for their quiet kindness, their ready smiles, and the meticulous care they took of their modest home. In their native Vietnam, they had learned the value of resilience. Having lived through decades of transition, They understood that true security was not built overnight, but was woven slowly, thread by thread, much like the fabrics they handled daily in their commercial sewing business. When they first arrived in Texas, they brought their 3 children and immediately sought out ways to contribute to the local community. Arlington possessed a vibrant, growing Vietnamese-American population, a community that had established its roots in several waves of immigration, particularly after the historic events of 1975. Long and Hong saw in this community a beautiful tapestry of old and new. Here, one could find traditional markets selling fragrant herbs and fresh ingredients, alongside modern businesses operated by energetic young entrepreneurs. The older generation worked tirelessly to preserve their language, their values, and their spiritual traditions, while ensuring that their children and grandchildren received the very best education the Western world had to offer. With the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who possessed a strong command of the English language and an outgoing personality, Long and Hong established their sewing enterprise. Chow became the public face of the business, interacting with contractors, negotiating terms, and navigating the complexities of American commerce. For nearly a decade, their efforts were met with remarkable success. They secured lucrative contracts to manufacture garments for major commercial entities